create a really simple bouncing ball using like essentially beginner or never seen After Effects. So After Effects is very similar to any of the other Adobe programs. You'll notice your tools up at the top, and a lot of these tools are similar to if you've ever used Photoshop or Illustrator. You'll notice some tabs. They look ever so slightly different than some of our other Adobe programs, but project is essentially anything that you're going to import: a logo, a video of a person, a flat still photograph of something. Whatever you're importing in to put into an animation or video goes into this project. You'll see it kind of automatically. They also call them assets, the assets of your composition. Okay, then in the middle you'll see the word composition. That's what we in motion graphics, it's kind of like your artboard. It's what's going to be seen. It's your view of your actual animation. Over here are our windows. So typically one of the biggest, you'll probably see character a lot because that's pretty normal, of changing typography, and paragraph, and then effects is one of the other ones that you'll use a lot. And these are a lot of preset effects that you can use, you can layer on top of each other, and they make some really cool stuff. I don't necessarily use every other little thing all the time, but those are kind of the main three. And then down below, you'll see your timeline, and there's nothing in this right now, so nothing's even showing up. But as we add stuff, just like layers in Photoshop or Illustrator or any other program, it will show up as layers in a timeline, and your timeline can move from left to right. So let's actually start something so we can see this timeline come to life. We go up to composition, new composition, and we're going to create one simple composition. In theory, you can add 20 compositions in one project and then layer those all onto each other in whatever way you want in one big composition. I call that nesting. So you can nest smaller compositions. Think of them as like chapters of a book, or different scenes in a movie. You can layer those compositions where you work on a single scene in one composition and then layer it with other scenes, even if it's just a fade to the next, in a bigger composition. So we're just going to make one. We're going to call it bouncing ball. You'll see lots of different preset sizes we can use. We're going to stick to kind of the general right now, 1920 pixels by 1080. That's what a lot of high definition widescreen TVs are. 29.97 FPS stands for frames per second. We have almost 30 frames that essentially go right next to each other to make one single second of what we call a motion graphic or an animation or even the film. There's lots of different things, and they've more recently added even these social media because content creation on social media is so big. But we're just going to stick to this right now. We're going to leave most of these things, and our time code is very interesting. You can start wherever. I honestly almost never mess with the start code, but duration is frames, seconds, minutes, hours. So right now this is set to 2 seconds, which if it only showed frames would show almost 60 frames. And we have a background of black, but that doesn't really matter. In the new rendering, you have to render out whatever you create into an actual movie file when you're done. And renderings doesn't really acknowledge this background color, so you have to actually create a background. So we'll hit OK. And now we see this black screen, high definition, widescreen. Now we also see our timeline here, and all these F's represent frames. And notice how when I get to just about 30, I get a 1 second. We have almost 30 frames per 1 single second. Even though it says the word F behind it, it's because this number is the frames and this number is seconds. So keep that in mind. We're at 2 seconds. All right, now let's go to our tool panel, and under your shapes, and yours might be on rectangle, if you click and hold, you can get to an ellipse, and we're just gonna make kind of a small sphere. Hold shift, make a sphere. We can leave it at this color if we want. We can also turn on title and action safe, which helps us see some centering marks. And we want to keep most of our important stuff kind of in this main, this is title, this is action. So we're definitely going to keep our main bounce within this line, which is the bottom of the action safe, meaning sometimes outside of that gets cropped. So you want to be careful. Okay. You'll also notice just honestly a gazillion different little windows and drop downs. If you close everything, that's what that looks like. You can also rename, hit return, ball, whatever. When you open these, you'll notice contents and transform. If you see a lot more stuff, just close until you just see these, because you can see there's just a plethora of stuff. Look at that I can open, like close. We're going to work in just transform. There's a lot of reasons you may do contents that gets more advanced, and we're going to transform the position and eventually the scale of our sphere. So a lot of motion graphics is guess and check. Test it out, what you think is best. If it doesn't look right, make adjustments from that point. So we're going to start our sphere up high. We're going to bounce it to the ground, and then we're going to make it look like it's going back up by honestly just simply copying and pasting our first keyframe. Keyframes are the main frames of movement. You set them up at key positions of movement that you want something to occur. And then the computer, if you have those keyframes set up properly, the computer fills in the in-between. They used to be called tweens. That's those frames, those 29.97 frames. The computer fills that in for you, which is really nice. So at the beginning, we hit a stopwatch. Now, you're not going to touch this stopwatch again unless you want to delete everything. So you only hit the stopwatch on the first time you want to create a keyframe. After that, it has more to do with moving on your timeline, adjusting something, and then a keyframe will automatically start. So only on the first time you're going to adjust one of these properties do you need to set a keyframe. So I'm going to go down to frame 1. I'm toggling down my timeline. And I'm going to go grab my arrow so I'm not making another circle. I'm going to move this down. And actually, before I do that, I am going to go adjust my anchor point. And I'm going to make sure my anchor point goes right at the bottom where I want this sphere to hit the ground. That's going to help it move more properly. So get the pan behind. I don't know why it's called pan behind, but it's the anchor point where you're moving your anchor. Stick it right at the bottom. Now I'll set again my position up high. I'm going to now move it down and watch how a keyframe is going to start. Ooh. Oh, I don't have my arrow. Make sure you get back to your arrow tool. Move it down. I want to stay kind of in title safe because I'm also going to add a shadow later on. But you can see how now a keyframe has started, and if I toggle between the two, you see it move. It's created all this in between. So I have my two main keyframes, and it says, okay, with you doing those two things, I'm going to fill in the blanks. Go to the end. I want this to look like a loop, so I'm going to copy, Command C. While I'm on this last frame, I'm going to Command V. And if I hit space bar, watch how it goes up and down and up and down. It's a little not natural, so let's make it a little bit more natural. Let's give it a squish as it hits right here. And what that has to do is adjusting the scale. Right now, the X and Y are locked, so if we adjust one of these, the whole thing scales. Command undo. So we're going to unlock. And you can test these if you forget, but the first one's going to do the left, like the horizontal, and the right one's going to do the up and down. So essentially, we want it to squish when it hits the ground. I'm going to start a keyframe. I don't want it to squish the whole time, because watch, if I go up here now, it's still squished, because I never set a keyframe when it was at 100. So let's go adjust this back to 100 when automatically sets, but now it's shrinking down to that, and really I only want it right before it's as it touches the ground to squish. So let's make an additional keyframe at 100%. I can copy and paste. So now it's full, 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 and then as it hits the ground, then it squishes. Let's go copy and paste to make this look seamless. And then let's go copy and paste at the end. And now watch our timeline. Down with a squish. Down with a squish. How nice. That's like a really quick, seamless flow. Okay, a few other things we can do. We can add a background. There's a lot of ways to add a background. One of the most simple ways is just making a rectangle. Now, what it's gonna do is I was selected on my ball, so I'm gonna undo, close this, select off of this. I'm gonna make a rectangle again. I'm gonna move it to the bottom layer, and then I'm gonna think, what is a complementary color of this aqua blue? Well, the opposite of blue is kind of an orange, so let's do some color adjustments to get a complementary color. Then let's use some atmospheric perspective, push it back by toning down a little bit of the saturation and hit OK. And it's pretty bleak right here with this sky. That's okay. Let's go in and adjust this guy, this ball, to have a gradient. Now before I do that, I'm going to grab this color because I know I want this color to be part of my gradient in case it doesn't allow that. So hit OK, get kind of a funky, click on the color picker zone, and then you can start to manipulate. So I'm going to go in here and put my color back, and I'm going to put my color back, and this one's at like 0, opacity, so I'm going to push that back up. And which one was that? Inside, outside. Okay, the outside one. Now I'm going to adjust the color just a little bit so it gives it a little bit of rounded. And I don't want to go ham. I also want to add like a little bit of like a bright, super bright kind of in there. Hit OK. You can adjust some of these points. Let's move that guy just a little bit. Gradients get really tricky, so just be careful with those. And now I've got a little bit more of like a real bouncing ball. Cool. Okay, let's take it an even step further. Close these down. It gets chaotic if you don't close these down. Let's add a drop shadow. Grab your ellipse tool, head down to where it hits the ground, and create within the action safe a little gradient. Now, let's go adjust this gradient. I don't need both points. We'll make both black. Ooh. Both black, but one of them can have a 0 opacity. Hit OK. Oh, this guy always gets a little crazy when I'm trying to make adjustments. It's very hard to make adjustments of gradients inside your see how it just constantly messes it up. So I'm going to delete. I'm going to make a perfect circle. There we go. And then I'm going to smash it. Let's move him over. Good. And now let's see when he gets smushed. Oh, so much better. Now I can adjust the scale, until I kind of like it. I'm going to move him down so that he has a contact point, and then I'm going to shift him down right below this. Oh, not right below that. Let's double hit return and call this shadow so we know what we're working with, and call this background so we know what we're working with there. Now we've got a little sphere. That's pretty cool. Let's go adjust close contents. That gets crazy. Let's go adjust the transparency. Let's say opacity. Let's say right at this point where I know I have my ball hitting the ground, let's say 100%. Let's go back to the beginning. It shouldn't be 100% as the sphere gets further away. Let's just adjust it. Let's still leave it there so we can see something, and it happens to be 36%. Command C, scrub to the end of our timeline, Command V, and now check out this loop. very cool of a bouncing sphere. There's lots of other things you can do in terms of adjusting positions. Let's close that guy. Let's go over here. Let's do something fun and just say, you can command minus to be able to see a bigger screen. Let's make it move from left to right. So I'm going to, while I'm on that keyframe for position, move it all the way to the left. Comes down weird, goes back up, move it to the right, hitting shift so that it's keeping that kind of amount. Although at this point, realistically, it would end after a bounce a little bit lower than it was at the beginning. That looks weird, right? Because it would fall in. So all we need to do for that is we want to be able to adjust the line on this guy to not be straight but round. So hiding under the pen tool is a convert. If you hover that, not right here, but right over that point and click and drag, you'll see it gives you a handlebar that you can adjust. So I'm just going to adjust this a little bit. Then let's see how it's going. Pretty cute, but the shadow doesn't follow it. How easy is that? Let's go adjust the shadow's position. Position, we definitely want it right here to land, so we have to start a keyframe. We have no keyframe started for this. This is still off. We're going to say, yep, now we're going to animate its position. Right there, I want it to be 100%. Over here, I want it to be under my sphere. Test, test, test. Gets a little out of whack. Now don't go in and just start adding keyframes. Be very selective, just a couple of keyframes. Back over here, let's do kind of the same thing. And then as it falls off, we move it all the way over. We test our thing. And look how quickly we have this bouncing ball. Very cool. Make sure you hit save. Save your composition wherever you want to save it. I'll save mine. And then you'll want to export and go to Media Encoder and be able to export. That takes a few minutes. You'll hit render out of that guy, and then you'll have a full little movie that you can see. Mine's going to take a minute to open. Let's see, if you don't already have it open, it will do that. But thinking about some of those little nuances of the squish, of a little shadow, of the sphere starting up higher, but after it bounces, realistically it would end a little bit lower. That's just pretty normal. And then being real selective about your keyframes and their positioning so that you're being kind of scientific about it and not just all over the place. Is really important. I was hoping this Media Encoder was going to pop up for you guys. In terms of trying to get a real seamless look. Breaking it down, and you can see it almost gets a little too ahead, so you could adjust some of that, but I think we have a pretty successful, quick and dirty little animation. Oh, here's our Media Encoder. This is what After Effects requires you to utilize now to render this animation out into an actual something you can see. So it's going to populate over here. For the most part, you're not using this, not even using this. This is only going to tell you what's about to happen, but in a minute it's going to populate right here because we added it to this queue. Give it a second. And your main stuff with that is checking your format to know what you want it to be. Do you want it to be an animated GIF? Do you want it to be an MP4? Do you want it to be... There's so many. That's kind of the equivalent of like a .ai file or a .pdf or a .jpeg, that kind of thing. Looks like it's still thinking. But eventually this will populate. You'll double check your format. Right now I like the H point, I think it's 264 or the MP4 or the animated GIF or something super duper simple. And then double check your output, which means where is this going to go when it's done rendering, so that you know where it's going to go and it's not buried in some 5 levels deep of a folder. Once, again, it's not populated yet, but once that's done and you've checked your format and your output then you can hit this little start queue and your movie will produce. And then at the end you'll have a full movie that can be sent or uploaded to YouTube. Oh, here we go. All right, all these different. We're going to stick with H.264. We're going to know where this is going. We'll just say desktop for now. Hit save, hit render. It goes through the rendering process. And when it's done, it pops out a nice little video that you can then send or upload onto the internet. Hope you enjoyed this lesson. Let me know if you have any questions.